All right, we'll call the meeting to order, and the first order of business is to elect the chair of the EISA committee.
I nominate Tammy.
Second.
Not it. Oh, shoot.
That was easy.
All right, vote.
All in favor?
Okay, thank you. All right, so can I have a motion on the minutes from February 16th? So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Okay. Review of grading survey results. I'm looking at you guys over here, Christine and Donna.
Did you send?
Christine
I
and
did.
Donna, excuse me. Yes.
So yesterday, Tuesday, yes, yesterday was Tuesday. So yesterday morning, during our admin meeting, you were sent documents regarding the survey results. The first tab, you will see the actual results with parent email addresses, student email addresses, their responses, their longer responses. And then the second tab attached to that is the actual pie charts on what they said regarding the questions.
Okay. I only saw tab.
At the very,
at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I said it, just in case you didn't see
Thank
both
you.
tabs. You're welcome. I thought you'd like a picture, a visual with.
It's helpful. Oh, there we go.
So it's interesting because I'll just start us off. The parent survey was very, very clear. 91% of parents, I'm not looking at it right now, but roughly 90+%.
90.5.
90.5, thank you, said that they would prefer a 100-point scale. We did not differentiate K-5 versus 6-12 in that survey. It was just in general. And the teacher responses, it was about a 9-point spread, around 56 to 8-point spread.
54-5 to 45-5.
If they didn't have it memorized.
54-5 were in favor, 45-5 were not.
Yeah. And then, Jamie, what was the student? Do you want to just, you probably have it
So
memorized.
students had two questions of them. Which do you prefer? Which would motivate you more? And which would you prefer? And so the initial one, which would motivate you more, was 54.5% said they'd be more motivated with a 0 to 100 scale. And then that same cadre of people, 54.5% preferred not to be motivated more. They preferred they preferred the 4-point scale. So they felt one was more motivating, but they preferred the one that was less motivating.
Which was? Can you
So they
repeat the
preferred-
numbers on what you prefer?
So the students preferred the 0 to 100.
Motivate.
No,
sorry,
I said that
motivate,
wrong.
motivate.
The students said they'd be more motivated with the 0 to 100 scale. They said they prefer the 4-point scale
And
by 54.5% in both instances.
Okay.
A little different, well, based on what this says, it says a little different, it says 54.7
Okay.
on the pie chart.
Yep.
It says.
I couldn't bring it up. I just-
Motivates you to work harder, is the 100-point scale. And which do you prefer, 51.3 said that they would prefer the 4-point scale.
Sure, bring it up.
4.3 is 4 point. And then up here, the motivate 54.7 be the 100.
So then in addition to that, we did have an open comment section of each survey. And the comments were kind of congruent with people's opinions. So there were people who, just in summary, the summary is that the comments were kind of supportive information for the way that people voiced their desires in their votes. Brian, I think you found a way to kind of sort without names, you were able to sort, because we really tried to keep this, the who out of it. We wanted the student and parent information so that if we had a clarifying question, we could contact them to clarify. There was nothing that we really needed to clarify, you know, and that information certainly just for the public, we would not share those email addresses publicly. If anyone asked for the survey results, we would give them the pie charts. But the staff were really quite divided. And I think that the goal for this evening's conversation is to talk about the results and what they mean and what we think we should do next. So this is a collaborative conversation. So I think that the way I had intended to structure this is that we would give each person a group and have a short group conversation and then report out and talk about it. But I don't want the groups to be the 3 board members, 4 administrators, it's not going to help anything if the groups are not mixed. So if we could just go around the room and count off 1, 2, 3, we're just going to do a simple group split like gym class. And that way no one gets picked last, right? I'll start us off. 1, 2,
3, 1,
2, 3, 1,
2, 3,
1, 2,
3, 1.
2. Okay, the 1s are over here, the 2s are over there, and the 3s are over there. Okay. So we'll take 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're One. You want 1, Mr. Scott?
Yeah.
All right.
It is the loneliest number.
You guys.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. All right, Steve, are you guys with us?
Yeah.
You guys want to come around this side?
It's just, we're gonna hit our legs on that bar. Yeah.
All right.
You can scoot up.
Yeah, I can scooch.
Had my shots.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
All right, so.
It didn't really work. Well,
Oh, yeah, but you
I guess it was gonna, yeah, I guess there's.
Well, that's probably.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, oh, yeah, I guess that's. I can touch screens too. Fair enough.
All right, Jamie, do you have your group?
Or 2.
Oh. That's a pretty hardy group. You guys good over there? You got enough people? Like 3s? Okay, yep, they have enough people. It worked. All right, so, I think it's. We should just do a quick round, kind of talk about next steps. Christine, what was that?
Which survey are we starting with?
I think we should start with the parent, no, the parent
So
ones.
you look at that and you say.
Let's go to the staff. That's where the tough conversation is.
Does anyone not agree
It's 59.
with the parent one?
Parent one, that's pretty.
That's straight.
That was the question.
I think it's very straightforward, yes, and I think it's.
I'm sure.
Looking at the emails and looking at their children are, it's very spread out in the district, so it's not just one particular area.
Was that surprised?
So for the staff survey, what I found most interesting was the idea of needing something to be consistent. Like looking for consistency, looking for,
for a while, you know, there's a lot of investment in time and energy, and
us
regardless of
to.
personal feelings or otherwise, you know, staff had that honest, but the other, it's tough to potentially see if you should do it, right?
We'll pause, it's
So
tough, it's tough.
I thought that was interesting, but again, you know, we don't know.
There's so much public purpose.
How many were, how spent in 10 years.
Okay, I read it. So
Right.
it's not, staff is very split.
I figured that was
Do we go back to something that's 0 to 100? Do we, they're looking for people to be consistent, having something more consistent that's not just by building consistency, but across the district.
A strong, I don't.
And getting support. I think to echo again and again was whatever is decided, We need support, we need some guidelines, we need time to figure this out.
Third, wanted to
I heard that too.
see the third.
Steve, what you think?
I remember seeing a lot of comments about it being easier to fail on the 100-point.
Yeah, that was alarming.
You're still.
And I think,
How many?
so I don't know the age differences in the districts, but I made the assumption from the comments I've read there's a difference between like the upper schools and the elementary schools, obviously in terms of what grades are appropriate for kids. So I think there's a difference there as
One
well.
did not exist and the other one did.
But I think the comments also show that
I
like
think some
teachers do just want what's best for kids. And I think they put a lot of comments into explaining why.
Well, that's teachers made that comment.
That's what it is, right?
But it would take, I think.
I'm gonna stop talking because I think I'll just,
Well, no, I just wanted to ask quickly, though, did you notice that there were some comments that were really detailed? And I noticed some of them were pretty powerful, or against.
Yeah.
There were, the people who were for gave an
All my
depth
eggs are in one
of
basket.
answer. They wanted to stay with the
Then I
4
want to report.
The people that didn't want to stay with everything, wanted to go for 100, like some of the, it's still powerful, they were like, just for what we do.
yeah, or ease of use, consistency, like other
Yeah,
schools
just
are
get this
doing
done.
it, yeah. There were a lot of, yeah, there was a lot more controversial people that wanted to keep supporting.
Some of the comments were.
I guess what I'm saying is that we should consider the thoughts before we tell them, regardless of what decision they make, there were things that they were concerned about their kids.
So can I?
And I think also it's good to note that
That's what they.
the staff really got into more detailed comments after Tom sent out a second email regarding what was kept confidential.
Yeah,
At
and that was good for me,
first-
they trusted that I was gonna keep.
Yes, because at first it was just yes or no, and we weren't getting any feedback, because I think they were very fearful that their email or that they were tracking what they were saying. And then once, Tom Rice sent out that other email about confidential to track it, then teachers really started to open up and be very honest about, why we're currently.
We got a lot more responses.
Correct. Yes.
They're not.
I'm surprised.
Yes.
Unless they're like.
Yeah, they're.
So I definitely. Especially, people that are.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you got your song running around and then.
It's very linked. Teachers, that's what my favorite. Are very passionate about
Looking at the names,
that's
so
gone
it's
into.
definitely some of us.
It's
At least on the high school and
competency based, which,
You're talking.
they say the decade, but I don't think. It came right around the time when.
12.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. And it's all the time.
Because they don't get
To
it.
go creating this whole system out there. And I can certainly understand,
Make strong statements.
even there was, I felt some anger, I felt a lot of anger. in the passion, that we, that we're just sort of discounting that work that I know was done. And just shifting the ground.
My original.
So I guess if we are going to
You said there's so
go
many.
to the 100-point scale, we don't have it. I think we're gonna have some work based on the information to.
Are very familiar.
That's exactly what I know. I wrote down the piece in there that I thought was pretty important, considering that teachers are really concerned about K.
Right, this is my first district.
And then we have a different emotion. last year, we didn't differentiate that. And I talked to Jamie about today, I said,
So that's the next level of
what,
conversation.
we need to look at some of our school districts for K-5,
I had discussion.
talk about K-5.
That's what I
What
heard.
happens in 4th and 5th grade to transition
And
to
one
grade
is
5 school.
supported no matter.
And just, and I, all that I'll say is that if the board chooses to remember, I just need enough time to have really just talking about these teachers that develop a manual for how to do this.
I'm like saying, I don't.
And have a conversation about
I don't cover the.
grading, homework, how it's gonna play out in the classroom before it can't happen instantly. You can't say like, oh, you know, we're gonna do this year, this is what it's gonna look like. We need to have your input, have a dialogue, have a very clear process set up, and I think the conversation needs to be, if the board wants to go to a certain scale, that there's enough time for us to transition everything in common. They've been through a lot these last 3 years. And people need to have input and time, and real genuine process to get ready for whatever. I don't even know if I can facilitate that between now and September, but if the board were to say the kids, that would become a significant part of all of our work to get ready for that. The curriculum work is super important. So we know
The form that we.
I'm not saying you can't, I'm just saying that.
This is what you're to rate your kids on. Is how you do it.
I definitely, so I had asked at the meeting for someone to sort of column C.
This was done.
I'm sorry, column B, because I wanted to see all the comments before we had like 24. It's easier to read it that way. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, there was definitely, I mean, I kind of wish we'd asked the question, just say we're K5 or 6, 12, because I think it would have been helpful to know. I do think no matter what, we need to look at the two separate, K5, 6, 12. Now, they don't have to be identical. I think you need to differentiate those two levels, and then that should be weighed in. But I mean, I think, you know, looking at it, and listen, I know I'm going to be biased, but I think everybody knows where I would vote if I was going to vote. I actually did read the survey on purpose, because I just, but a lot of the comments really were answered hard 4-point scale. They had a lot of legitimate concerns for why they were concerned with going to the 120. So, but I don't think anyone's disagreeing with the most important point, which is you need a grade that shows the students understand. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. So I guess my question or wonder is, there's a lot of meat in these comments for the 4-point scale. So if the move is going to be to a 100-point scale, I guess my wonder is, what are the grading? What are the types? What are the things that you want the grades to be able to do? And because whatever that 4-point scale or 100-point scale, you've got to be able to know that you can check off the boxes that you've done these types. So there are things in these comments that maybe they're not types, and that's people are holding on to something. The district is not going to have set as a type. Right, so, well, like something that's type, something that's something that, right, I'm sorry, I'm using some edu speak, right, something that you would set, the district would set and say, we're all doing it this way, it's non-negotiable, versus you're gonna have some freedom to decide what you want to do, here are guardrails that won't work with this. Right, there are things that just have to be tight and should be tight. And then there are other things that you should leave loose. Right, exactly. And I think for grading, that has to be decided what is going to be tight and what is going to be loose. You know, like, for example, obviously we have work competencies, right? That's a statement. We set up our course with the skills that we need to master by the time they complete the course. So is it going to be a type that we track competencies a certain way and report them a certain way? Or are we going to average grades together? That could be tight or loose, right? Are we going to use rubrics to grade? That needs to be decided. If we're going to use rubrics, what is the rubric template going to look like? Is it, can everybody come up with that? Is it going to be set a certain way so that everybody's going to have the same kind of template? I think, to me, those are way deeper questions that you can't answer in 1 or 2 meetings. Say, hey, I actually don't think you're the right people to be putting those recommendations together. It's got to come from the staff. They're the ones that we're contracting to teach the kids, right? They have to take the curriculum
sequential skills.
and help our students get
Pretty
there.
straight.
So,
I
don't know.
Which we then have the teachers.
Very subjective grading. Who are hardcore, who are old style.
So, let me check in.
Okay.
And we have the teachers using.
So there's a number that were just. I thought
Is there any way to get back to that?
What?
Well, that would be another thing. That would be another.
That was like,
thing.
I felt it was a loss for that. You know, I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's a 1 thing?
Yeah, sure. Well, and I think part of that, I think that we're tracking and learning from the end of the year, so the progress along the way is gonna vary a little bit as kids are learning at different rates. So to have an honor roll every quarter, you have to make an assumption that you can determine at the end of every quarter that kids have to have learned this certain amount, and then that's it. Like now we're cutting across.
It is, but there's a, and I'm not trying to be arbitrary, I just think that there's another way to do that, which is to not to track it by the quarter, but recognize that there may be, I was talking about this earlier, that your skill level at the end of week 3 of a unit,
If I just take that
Maybe
small group of like
X,
14
and that's what it should be.
that were 5 and 6.
So it's,
And then give some, I could see
call it whatever you want,
5,
right?
Sure. Probably.
But it's not the end skill that you wanted to take out.
Sure.
And the question becomes, and this is where we're going into the work right now. This is the conversations that we have to have. These are the conversations that have to happen. When you think about, are you grading the sequence and where the student should be at that point? Or are you grading the end against the middle? Is do I want you to perform the cello suites on the cello, the first one? If after 3 weeks and you can only play the first 8 measures, that's what I would expect you to be able to do after the first 3 weeks. So that would be an end.
But see, we have the capacity to do that now. We didn't have capacity to do that 10 years ago.
Right, and that's the
That's
thing
why
where,
we use your-
that's the thing where we are on an arc of kind of saying that there are some things in here that, like, the goal is to pass, you have to be able to play the basics. You have to, or you don't pass. But the steps along the way, you can get feedback that shows you that you're in the correct trajectory to get the. So if you get to, like, I know from that piece of music that the last 8 measures are really difficult, just the way it lays out. So I know that that's going to take longer to learn than the first 8 or 16 measures, because they're repetitive, right? So I know as a teacher that I'm gonna spend more time on this 8 measures, and that it's gonna take more time to get there. But at the end of the process, you'll be able to play the whole piece from beginning to end. And that to me is the standard. I can only think of just for music, right? The standard is you have to be able to play the best music. What's the rubric for that? Reasonable articulation, the right notes, the right rhythm, and a flow, like a basic flow for music, for like a high school kid. For a college kid, you talk about dynamics, right? Does it get louder or softer? Does it get elasticize the phrases, their expression? That's college level. So for me to think about, that'd be exemplary, right? Because it's way, or you teach it to someone else. So not only can I play it, I can teach you how to play it, right? That's another example of, like, you know it so well that you can actually impart it. It's really interesting, isn't it? But it's just a way to think about it. But you're right, Tammy, that, like, you could say that exemplary would be that you would do it at college level. That's perfect. But I think that the question is, it's like Brian's parking analogy. Okay, I got the car on the spot, it's crooked, but it's not, the wheels are outside the spot. But I've only been doing it for 2 days, that's really good for 2 days.
I mean, I've heard.
So is that
some strong
a 2, because the goal is to park the car perfectly correctly with everything, or is that a 4 for where you're at? And then the next step is to get to the point where it's all in the box and there's nothing hanging out, you know, over the lines. And at that point, it's still a little crooked, but it's in the spot. It's that progression of learning that we have to figure out how we're going to rate our kids, and the teachers have to be a part of that.
So we think that.
And so I think that whatever scale we choose, like, the real work is calibrated.
What's the best way to make?
The real work for us is
The
calibrated.
language or the.
That's the real work. For me, the grading system is,
Well,
I can only live with 4 or 100.
Got straight.
Because I know that the real work is that progression in the instruction.
Very finite.
So I used an example yesterday. It was actually from that angle. So for principals, I'm taking
Looking
at
at
food service elementary. So we had to rate food service, and that was one of our other things. He had said to us, he's like, he'd given us a scale, he said, give up to 20 points for the budget, give up to 10 points for the menu choices, 10 points, we were all these things. So Matt and Lila and I sat down after, and he said, okay, you and I were totally very limited number. I scored it way differently. I was like, how do you figure? And he said, well, between the two proposals, for one of them, you gave it a 15 out of 20, and I gave it a 10 out of 20. Why'd you give it a 15 out of 20? And I said,
Look at
we 20 numbers to work with. I thought I liked about 75% of it, I guess. And he said, well, I kind of felt the same way, but I felt like this was more important than that. So I gave it a lower rating. And I said, well, we're not calibrated. So this is the problem. We gave us 20 numbers to work with. We were all left to our own devices to figure out how to award the 20 points. That's the problem. Because if we didn't have any calibration or any direction, all we had was the score had to add up to 100. So, I mean, that's, it's just not enough.
And that brings us to like the little bigger conversation point, PK5, right? Christine, I think we talked about for first grader, we don't like read yet, we don't want them to get it now. They're on the normal curve of learning how to read.
People are struggling with.
What is that? Can I count to 100?
And that's what people get.
Can I identify all the letters of the alphabet and their sounds here?
Because
So
it's.
we think about.
Teacher, I was working today on her
In
project.
elementary,
And again, it's
very much
foundation
that
on
competency-based, like,
how much
I have this.
That's the thing, I asked the kids before they go send your
What
what
makes we're moving to this, what's the big report and how do you keep that primary
Look at
level
it and say,
safe,
am I
so parents understand.
You know,
These
she
are
lays out.
my child
And I'm so
only identify 10 sounds. I know how to pick jobs,
I can get a zero.
how much, how to.
First week I know that, it's like, what are you doing?
I know it's.
It's more of those skills that parents want their kids to
She says it's a
write
hard deadline
versus
today.
just having.
That's what it has to be.
The lowest grade.
That's development, something that's more.
Which I
development.
always have the ability to.
And then Ryan's
work
staff
after
is
hours
requiring
out, and then they
their
also
same
have certain.
not
things
quite go to
for the
100 point scale.
And
Just talk about how to transition to 3, 4, and 5
They had more.
towards 6th grade, and then have it start in 6th grade. Those are conversations that I think we would want to have with staff, because I don't know.
Five.
I really don't feel comfortable recommending a 3, 4, 5. I need to look at other examples. I've not studied that myself, so I just need some input. I need to see.
I had one parent visit in this class.
Well, they switched their game to 4.0 with the letter grades that they use, like the teachers are not.
Because she taught her that education.
4, 5, and 6.
3, 4, and 5.
There are parents.
Well, it'll be 3, 4, and 5 next year. This year, it's 4, 5, and 6.
They're still
There's
doing
no
the
person. No.
You gotta get the
They are, but I mean, we can,
information.
it depends on where things lie and what you do, but.
We can change the letters for the little kids. They don't have to be what they are now.
I guess I
There's a lot
I
of,
personally feel like
wherever decisions,
K through 2
there's gonna be a lot of.
as a grade, it's silly to.
I think
determine grades.
I remember.
I don't think that's a traditional thing in a district.
No. Or any district.
I don't think any district's done that.
Grades at
Sure.
that age, maybe around 3rd or 4th grade.
Every single one of those things.
Sure.
Exist in what
Well,
you-
because that's where the skill is, enough teachers start to bifurcate different levels of understanding. For that, it's, we know.
That is a training.
You're there or you're not.
This is
Where
how
you're working for, you're not where you need to be for the end of the year. That's really what parents want to know. Is my kid progressing
referred to.
At a
that
normal
we
week,
needed
is
a
something
language
behind,
line.
which skills did they lack?
I mean, but it wasn't in trash fluidity altogether. I'm not saying go back to midterms. I'm just saying, maybe in the end of the period.
Really
That caused a lot of issues with between us. That was not a good situation.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, how are you doing? We're at 5:15. We thought we'd check in with each group.
That's a great song by the Who, but I'm fine.
All right, cool.
What was I gonna say?
Hey, Therese.
Yeah, hey, Dawn, how are you guys doing over there?
And multiple choice.
Having a good conversation.
That's
The monkey, yeah, 25%, just
Some
randomly.
way of throwing out
Big
some
boxes.
questions.
So, I mean, there's ways around. I had some discussion.
We do some sort of. But these are like conversations.
Yeah, it would have to be.
But if you're doing the six.
Of course.
I
It cost me 6 hours this week. All right, we're reeling you in, Jamie.
Times 14.
That's 6. You want to report out for a group training?
No, okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, besides one person has a series of questions, comments. I circled those and I said, quite generic. I mean, they were all good comments about how we make sure this, how we do this. Yeah.
How you doing over there?
You guys are having a good conversation, aren't you?
I don't think we go anywhere, but.
Oh, okay. Well,
We're not making decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting impressions.
In like actual 100 points.
Who's gonna report out for your group? Dawn.
Oh, great.
Whoa.
She's the board
Yeah.
chair, so it's just.
I'm not chair of this one. I said not
That's
it
what you
right
get for
away.
not having assignments.
I said not it when I got in. I mean, I also did that in facilities too, but that's another story. No, I said not it. I said not it. I already got it for-
You might be at 90 and you're at 85.
Hey, Jamie, time's up. Jamie.
Are
you ready?
Where's the Oscar music?
I just put my foot in the trap every single time.
All right. Jamie, you got shushed by Patty and that's saying something. Wait, stay with your group because you're gonna report out. You gotta, somebody's gonna report out for your group.
That's gonna hurt to go home, so I get shut down.
Oh, yeah.
Can't go home, you gotta go to your shush at the next meeting. too.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, I think our chair decided that group 3 would go first.
Oh, great. So so we have a lot of conversation about, we talked about the number of responses that we had, especially the students. I did point out that I did not tell my students about the survey because I didn't want them to feel pressured by me on what what they thought mom wanted them to say. I wanted them to see the surveys and fill them out however they felt. So I asked them after the surveys closed, because I could see their email addresses were not listed in there. And I asked them about the surveys and they said they didn't know anything about them.
Really?
So I'm assuming they got email to all the students.
Mhm.
I don't know if there was an announcement made that they were there or homeroom teachers said anything about it, but neither one of my kids knew that they were there because they get so many emails every day. I think they just glossed by. So I don't know that we really got a good representation with only 60 something students responding. So I thought I kind of pointed that out. But we talked a lot about, what does this grading change mean? Whatever ends up being decided, the staff has to feel supported. And they have to understand clearly what the expectations are, how the grading is going to work, how to report it out. There needs to be very clear cut, defined rules, guides, whatever you want to call it, to
A
go
manual,
along with,
a
yeah,
manual.
basically, and training to go along with either system. And it was interesting, one of the things that I noticed was you had some staff that, were like 100-point scale. It can go, absolutely go with rubrics, it can go with competencies. And then on the other side, it was, you have to say 4-point because you can't do 100-point with rubrics and competencies. So I thought the mindset was, interesting to see that there's, two different perspectives on how it either can or can't be done. So I think that's, goes in a lot into, whatever we decide. There has to be a lot of training and explanation and the other thing we talked about was, sometimes you have staff that come in that already understand the 100-point system. That's the system they came from. So they have to be trained on the 4-point system and then vice versa. If we were to switch to a 100-point system and you have people coming in on the 4-point system, you're going to have to train them on the 100-point system. So you're going to have to train new people coming in are always going to have to be trained on the new system, or a number of them are going to have to be trained on the new system. You're never going to get away from that, no matter which one you choose. It's, I guess support was really the biggest piece that came out of it, no matter what we do here. And then, what else? Accountability. Accountability is another big conversation that we had. To motivate the students, that's really, I think, the goal in all of this is to make sure students are motivated to achieve, at a higher level. And accountability is a big piece of that, because we talked about how, the kids are, and Annie was subbing, and it was, well, it doesn't really matter what grade I get today, because I can retake it. Because I can retake it, I can redo it. So the motivation isn't there to necessarily get that higher grade. And at least the first time around. And it was interesting because there was a student response that was very clear that they want more accountability. That was really important to them. They took the time to type it in there. But I think that, accountability for the students getting things in on time, trying their hardest the first time, and then the teachers, holding the students accountability for those deadlines and not allowing them to just kind of turn it in whenever they want. Because it makes it really hard. It's hard on the teachers, it's hard on the students, it's just, all around, it's challenging. So, that was another thing that we were talking about. And then we were also trying to kind of determine, can you get an F on a 4-point scale? And what does a 27 mean? And how do you recover from that if you're on a 100-point scale? And if you build rubrics, do you build them so there's a cap off grade, lowest grade you can get, kind of like the rubrics are now, whereas unless you get 0, you don't get an F. You know what I mean? Like, so those kind of all other things we talked about. And yes.
Great, thank you. Did you guys are you the spokesperson, or was there?
I'll do it, I guess. We didn't talk about that. We could have continued talking for an indefinite amount of time. I mean, there's.
I'm not sure that was them or you, but I'll let the group
I
decide.
could have talked for an indefinite amount of time. They would have challenged that talk for an indefinite amount of time. No, seriously, there's just a lot that goes on in grading. So we talked a lot about that. We originally talked about, well, we were surprised by results. So nobody's really surprised by the parent result. The teacher's result, I was not surprised by the teacher's result. Other people were, thought there'd be, because of the history, there'd be a stronger anti change than there was, that there would be a majority in favor of the 0 to 100. We made the same point about the students. There's only 63, 64 respondents, students. So it seemed clear that they were saying is, yeah, this might motivate me more, but I don't know that I want to do that. But it's a very small percentage of the students. So how representative of that in terms of the people that put it in. And then, so we talked about some of the comments and what would we think may or may not happen with turnover? You know, some of the people that were very much against it, would we lose people? What would be the driver behind losing people? What were some people's concerns? So a lot of discussions around that, and then around what there's all systems, there is no perfect system. All of them have issues and concerns. You talked about the inconsistencies that are possible with traditional grading, and what's the distinction between an 84 and an 87 traditional grading, for example. We also talked about, you know, the flip side also exists with competency grading. We have a P's, and P's can be anything from a C to an A. So there's just, no matter how you do it, and which system, I mean, I talked about some experiences that I've seen, and people have told me about, we don't teach E's in this class. P is the same as an A statement. So we did talk about why do the parents not fully understand it? And I was saying, well, that I think it's true that parents don't, but it's also been my experience that neither does the staff and the administration, because I've seen very different answers from very different people as to what it means and what they're saying to the kids. That whatever is going to play out, the administration is going to have to, much as Don said, is going to have to spend time to make sure that we have the consistency, that people know how to do the translations and know how to be consistent for the best position of the kids. We also talked about the zero score, and that also came up with a 4 on a zero score, or scrap the lowest grade, you know, kind of thing with doing grading. So there's different methodologies to address some of the concerns that are brought up. It was interesting. There was very strong statements from people who were against, but there's also very strong statements from the staff that was for. Thank God, please hurry it up, you know. So, and on the other hand, this is crazy, we're going backwards. So there's a difference there. And we were still talking about that, and the differences between how you apply it in math versus how you might apply it in ELA, et cetera, and then the bell rang. I had to come back to my desk.
Sorry, Jamie.
That's all right. So our group echoed pretty much everything that the other two groups talked about. We talked more about the differentiation between K3 or 5 and 6 through 12, that was critical, that there seemed to be, please tell me if I'm wrong, but there seemed to be a consensus in our group that K2 is kind of easy, where we should not use a 100-point scale and letter grades for K2. We wanted to mention that, or I'm mentioning that I even feel like I need more information about grades 3, 4, and 5, and what the best way is to kind of move students from you're progressing and you almost have it, okay, you can do this, when you're learning how to read and learning how to write and learning how to use basic math skills, to using math, reading, and writing skills to learn. So when you're in K2, you're learning how to read. From 3rd grade on, you're reading to learn. And so I don't know what the best practice is for 3, 4, and 5. And I would ask Ryan to explore with Patty and Christine, to explore models for that transitional band and come with a recommendation with input from teachers. So the bottom line is, if the board is choosing to make a 100-point scale the direction that the district is heading, there are a number of issues that will need to be addressed, and we would need time with teachers to give us input to create a manual that would be used to roll this out at whatever point we roll it out, and then also to train new teachers that we hire regardless of when we hire.
Do we already have something like that for the 4-point scale?
There is, but it's old.
Well, we do, but it's different.
It would be
Grading percentage is very different from grading with a rubric.
And there would be a lot of issues that have to be straightened out. So for example, you all have alluded to some things that I think would be critical things that need to be discussed. Number one, homework. Does it count? Does it not count? And how much does it count for? Number two, are we going to continue to have the habits of work, or I'm sorry, Brian, what is the terminology?
Work study practice.
The work study practice is separate and graded separately. Right? So do you turn things in on time? Do you show up on time? And what role does the competency that's required by the state play in a 100-point scale? And how do we manage the competency? If you pass the course with an overall average of 80, if homework counts, and you don't pass the competency, what happens? Now, in my mind, I know, but I'm not gonna say because that's not fair right now. We need to have people talk about that. But I have a pretty good idea of what I think would happen. But I'm a member of a group of people here that need to decide this. So there are a lot of different pieces that need to be ironed out. And I'm sure that if we did a whip around with the admins, they'd add five more than what I just said. But I think, did I cover to the admins, did I cover the big ones? Are there any other ones that you can think of that are? And you got to remember, these conversations have to happen at each grade level with different groups, because obviously homework is incredibly different at first grade than third grade, fifth grade and seventh grade, let alone high school, because it's easy to think about what 7th through 12th graders need. I just want to make sure that we're very careful about what, having been a K2 principal myself, I'm advocating for where my heart is with those little ones that are learning how to read. It's super important not to break their confidence. It's important it needs to be a completely nurturing environment for those first 4 years. It does. It's the most, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, the best place for us to invest our time and money is at K2. You don't see the results for 8 years, but it is, if you do it right, it makes a world of difference later on. So I guess that would summarize where we're at. So I think the question that I have for our 3 committee members is what is our next step? And I'm not asking that rhetorically, I'm asking sincerely, like, are we ready to bring a recommendation to the board based on the surveys? Do we need to do another round of student surveys with the same survey, but just, I don't know if you made an announcement, I don't think you did, and that's okay if you didn't, we didn't ask you to. You know, if the kids didn't fill it out, we were trying not to inject ourselves in this. We were trying not to push it.
Right.
We were trying not to manipulate it. We sent it out in an email. If you answered it, you answered it. Because we also wanted to find out how important it is to them. If 60 people out of 800 people answered it, that's a pretty low turnaround from the student perspective. And I would love to know how many of them were 10th and 11th and 12th graders. Because based on some of the answers, I'm sure some of them were 11th and 12th graders, right? The ones that really wrote a real answer were clearly not, younger students. My son would have just henpecked,
And we
yeah,
have
whatever.
their emails too, so we could easily
Right,
tell.
we could
which
easily
grade they
figure
were.
that out, but we haven't done that yet.
I
We
would
just-
also piggyback on that with the number of responses from parents. And with that went out as a blast through the same system we use for, here's a snow day coming, or don't forget there's an early release, and 1,600 families to have about a 1/6, if you count 2 adults per household responding, that's telling too.
But we didn't text it to people, did we?
No.
We did emails.
Right, true.
Because texting it to people would have been a bigger reach. I
That's
think.
true.
I think they're used to getting text messages.
I'd like to say it's probably not 1,500 or 1,600 families, because many have more than one kid.
True.
No,
So,
that's a good point, Amy. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got 2 kids.
Many have one parent be the person, the respondent.
Yeah.
So,
I'm less concerned about the number of parents. I'm not concerned about the surveys. I think they gave us a fair snapshot personally. But if the group doesn't feel that way, I'm open to that. I'm just saying that when I saw them, I felt like, yeah, we got 200 and some odd parents. I thought that was very strong.
Yeah, almost 300, I thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
It's pretty strong.
Yeah,
It's pretty strong for what we normally get for.
Oh my
response.
goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Very strong compared to what we normally get on anything. Considering that we closed the middle school and 115 people showed up to the meeting, to get 290 some odd response is for our community high. So I guess the question is, do we feel like we have enough information to bring a recommendation to the board at the May meeting? Do we want to have another meeting early on in May to discuss some more? Where are we at? This is what my father-in-law likes to say.
So first, just from, since I quoted some slightly off percentages, are we going to post the pie charts so people can see
Yes.
the pie chart? That's what it says.
Yes, we can post the pie charts.
Yeah, so that'll be posted, so then I'll go through the emails and correcting that. My perspective is, we have 90% of the parents who send their kids to the school, whose kids they are, saying this is what I want to see. We have a majority of the teachers saying this is my preference. You have 59% of the teachers saying either this is my preference or I have no issues with it, of the respondents. And you have, even though it was a low respondents, you have, of those that chose to respond, 55% saying that it's most motivated. So I would be in favor of pursuing this and getting on with the next steps. And just for clarification, I know, Tom, you mentioned concerns about K through 2, but I just feel the necessity to say the operational directive from the board presently is A through F tied to a numeric for the district. There was no exceptions carved out in that directive.
Right.
That was
And
voted
we
on
would-
7-0. So
We would need a board vote to adjust that.
correct. Just want to make sure that's
Yeah.
clear to people.
And I just want to go on record as saying I agree.
Yep.
That was in the directive was to have it ready for the fall of this coming school year. And so we paused on the K2 to bring it back to the board to get clarity. So sorry, Brian.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
So I have a question. It seems like the consensus in the group is that the K2 piece should be bifurcated. And then the 3 through 5, we should at least discuss what the transition, like, if there's a ramping up to the 6th grade. Would the group be comfortable with having a conversation about rolling out 6 through 12 and then dealing with K through 5 after? Like, would that be I'm just trying to think about the amount of work. So I'm thinking about what's going on. We've got the NEASC accreditation and the curriculum alignment that absolutely has to happen. We cannot fail the NEASC accreditation. So for me as superintendent, I need to say that that is a critical piece of work that cannot be adjusted. Not because of our timelines, but because the NEASC visit is in November. And we have to utilize those 7 days at the end of the year for the purpose of the curriculum writing to prepare for the NEASC accreditation.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
That goes along with that. So when we're writing the curriculum and all the rubrics, are we gonna have to go backwards if we're not kind of dealing with them at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think so for K5, but I do think so for 7 through 12, 6 through 12. I would personally prefer, and please, anyone in the room that's an administrator, Patty especially, feel free to chime in, but I think that if you focus on transitioning 7 through 12 first, or 6 through 12 first, and then give us time next year to deal with K through 5 or K through 5, I think that we could continue with a similar system to what we have now for K through 5, but be ready to go for that for the fall. I mean, if you guys, look, I'm just gonna say it outright to make it simple. If you all want this done in September, there's no way we can do it all and do it well. We just can't. There's not enough time. If you say to me, do 6 through 12 because it's clear that's what everyone wants, we're gonna have to hustle. Right? It's not going to be easy. We need to have a committee tomorrow established of teachers that are going to sit down with administrators and probably this committee and have we'll have to work over the summer. We'll have to meet. The manual technically would have to be done before August 1st because you can't plan training if it doesn't exist before August 1st. That is a heavy lift.
Especially considering we have a boatload of curriculum writing happening this summer simultaneously. And probably the same people who are going to be doing the curriculum writing would be the people interested in this conversation as well. So we've got a lot of competing interests we're going to have to figure out how to manage.
Are there other districts that we can borrow?
Of course, I've already identified a couple that I would want to borrow from. But that doesn't mean
It
that,
doesn't mean stuff that doesn't have to be written, but if we have 30 and stuff.
yeah, Dawn, thanks for clarifying. Whenever we say write something,
Right.
we as educators always assume that, I don't know if I gave you the Austin Kleon book, Steal Like an Artist. So we did training my first year here on Steal. I'll give you a copy of it. It's really great. But the idea is that artists always steal from other people. You have your influences, the things that you want to mimic, what you want to be like, and then you see that in painting or music. You can hear it, the influences. So we always look at other places and try to take things, but in the process time, it's not. It'd be one thing if I could just say to a bunch of staff, "Hey, we're going to stop for the next 3 days and just do this." It's not, but we can't. We have kids in school, we're running, and it gets really, really hectic from April break on with students. They really kind of get into like, we're done mode and they're not done. And we have to, it's a constant struggle to keep them going from April break, from the end of April break until June. I'm not sitting here saying that we can't do this. I'm simply saying that it's a really heavy lift and we would need support. We would need to pay teachers. We're having some difficulty right now with some of the teachers who have signed up to do the NEASC work. They're just like, I'm too overwhelmed. And we're paying them a substantial sum of money to do that work, and
Or prepared to pay them.
or we are prepared to pay them.
They're not taking the money and not doing the work. They're saying,
Thank you.
I don't even want the money.
I don't even want
It's
the
not
money.
worth the money right now.
It's not worth it right now. So it's not, I think what I need to do is work with my team and try to figure out and come back to you with a proposal or a conversation. If that's what you want to do. But the three of you, we have to go through the process. You have to bring it to the board. The board has to vote on it. That can't happen until May 18th. Because we don't have a board meeting until May 18th. But if we know that's the direction that you're going, we have the
Because we have a
Fremont meeting.
on
It's
the
a
10th.
joint meeting.
Tuesday the
When?
10th.
Wait, when's the Fremont?
Tuesday the 10th.
It's our first May
Well, no,
meeting.
we do both. Fremont meeting is short. and then-
We could do it's in Fremont.
Yeah.
So it's a little funky and I kind of would like to have it, honestly, I'd like to have it here with teachers present and people. I just don't want to get accused of doing something behind the scenes when we didn't.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I don't, if we know that that's what you're,
Fremont.
if we know what you're going to recommend, then we can get to work. Once we know what you're going to recommend, trying to figure this out, right? Like, we're not gonna wait until May 18th to even talk about this. We're already talking about it. We met for half the day Tuesday about it. I mean, we kind of know what the surveys say. We're not, you know, we're just trying to figure out the next step. So what do you guys think? Jamie kind of said, I'd like to move forward with this. Are you willing to go with 6 through 12 so that we can get that part out and running?
I'm not willing to consider the lower grades without a better statement as to the whys that I received today.
So you feel like little kids in first grade should get 1 to 100 in Fs if
Yes.
they fail? Okay, so we have a major philosophical
Correct.
disagreement. I do not agree with that.
I know.
Okay, I just want to go on record as saying that that's a very serious problem. So the board would have to discuss that then.
The board has already directed that.
Right, but I'm putting it on the agenda to have that discussion because I'm not comfortable with K through 2.
That's fine.
Okay, I just want to be clear what
I
I'm
just
doing.
want to be clear, there was a 7-0 vote.
That's right, and we brought it to EISA and told you.
Well, yeah.
There
but we
was a
didn't.
7-0 vote, A through F, tied to numeric.
Right, and I brought it to the board in fall, and I told them that we were gonna hold off and talk about this later, and everyone was okay with that. So we're going to have to have a vote on that. You don't have to be.
But the
But
discussion
the
didn't
whole
go to
board
that
did say They're
level.
okay with it, Tom.
The
That's
board-
my point.
The board, excuse me, the board discussion did not go to that level.
It
We
did.
didn't say, okay, we're literally going kindergarten through 12. I'm not sure that we
Said the
all kind
district
of thought
would
that through
change
completely.
A through F. It's grading to A through F tied to numeric.
Okay, well, I'm just
June 10th
saying,
video.
I
Yeah,
think
you
we
did.
really do need
I
to
know
have
you
that
did.
discussion
Yep.
at the board level to kind of tease that out.
So do we have a work meeting on this for the board to discuss?
I
Because
mean,
we
we-
can set up a work meeting at any time.
We can just meet the first Wednesday of May. Oh, okay. That's what it was. I knew that there was a reason. So why don't we meet? Well, I don't think that the point that, look, the K2 thing, I was bringing back to the board because I wanted clarification, no matter what happened here. So Jamie's right, the board voted on that, and we had until September to roll that out. We didn't think at the time to ask about K2. So we have a directive to tie a letter grade to numerics. And if the board doesn't, if it stays the way it is, theoretically, we would give first graders A, B, C, D, or F in September. Because the board directive was to have it ready for rollout by the end of this year and implemented by September. It did not clarify whether or not the numbers were 1 to 4 or 0 to 100, which is what prompted this whole thing, right? And we went over that. We're fine with that. What I did speak to people this fall and say, we have concerns about this, whether or not it was the whole board or not, we didn't have a formal vote. I knew I was gonna have to bring it up this spring because it took so long to get 4 through 12 up and running, right? Like they are now already using letter grades tied to numerics in 4 through 12. The question here is, what are the numerics? So in light of what are the numerics, we also have to have a conversation about what to do with the younger grades, right? And so I think that what we need to do is, it's not going to change our timeline, whether it's next week or the 18th of May, in terms of us, we're going to start working on this, because it's pretty clear to me that 6 through 12 is moving to a 100-point scale. K through 5 is up for debate, is what Jamie doesn't agree, so it's fine. We have to have a conversation as a whole board and talk about what's going on. What I'm saying to you is, if you want it for September to go to a 100-point scale, not letter grades tied to numerics, I think that we can digest 6 through 12 more reasonably than K through 12. That's what I'm saying to you. If we're just switching from having a 4-point scale to having a letter attached to it, we can do that next week. Because we're already 3/4 of the way there. We've already done 4 through 12. But if you're asking me to change the whole grading scale, there are a lot of conversations that have to happen before that happens. And I'm saying that I think that we could do it for 6 through 12, but I don't think that we could do it for K through 5 and 6 through 12 with everything else that we have to do for September. That's all I'm saying. Did I get it? Is everyone okay with any thoughts? Go ahead, Matt.
I'm on the fence. I don't know if we can pull it off. I'm gonna be real honest. We got a lot going on.
Okay.
People are burned out.
Mhm.
And they got a lot of curriculum work to do. That's all I'm gonna say. Like,
No, say the truth. That's what we're here for. You have to.
it's gonna be interesting.
We don't pay you to be a yes man. We pay you to tell us what you think based on what you know of your staff, because we
I
appreciate it.
just think it's gonna be a tough lift.
Brian?
I think some of my staff, it's gonna be an incredibly hard lift. And I think some of my staff, a lot of them, the newer staff, will say, I've had a 100-point scale, give me the kids and I'll deliver a grade, but I don't think it's going to be calibrated and consistent. And I worry that we're not going to have a grade that represents how much learning has taken place. I don't think that can happen between now and September, even if we had all the time in the world.
Okay.
My wonder would be, is it worth asking NEASC if we should defer the accreditation process? Because I think that right now, that's literally in front of us, staring us down. And I also think this would be a substantive change to the degree that we would have to redo an entire self-reflection and collect new evidence of how we're going to grade and assess for learning. Because right now, all the student work we've collected is based on this system. So I actually think the entire accreditation process is, I think it's worth us calling NEASC to say, this is what we're thinking about doing. Should we be pushing out?
And we did reach out to them, and you know this.
Yeah.
They said that it would probably end up in the bucket of things that need to be addressed, but if we are actually making the decision, I would make another call to them and just talk with them, but it is a big change, but I think, I'll look up the letter that I have while we go to, I just want to hear from Ryan.
Sure. I think that I've been concerned with grades, with 6th grade moving up to the secondary level and taking on more of an elementary definition of what Memorial School is going to be. I have a different level of concern with regards to that whole idea of providing a failing grade to an 8, 9, or 10-year-old student. And I ethically, we talked about ethics and values. I struggled with the idea of a 3rd grader thinking that they're a failure when they really are at that foundational level of gaining knowledge and skills. So I think that whether we do some more research at the SAU level to see what area schools are doing at this developmental level, that may be a path. We're a little bit unique in in a sense because we are a smaller community, but we've gone away from the pre-K-5 building where if you're in one building, you really don't have two different grading models, right? Because you're in one building, but we are now in that we've got the primary and we've got the intermediate, and we do have neighboring communities around us that use that same or very similar model, and we can certainly see how they are assessing and providing feedback on the student learning. And I think that would be a worthwhile thing to do, but you know, it doesn't feel comfortable to me at this point when I think of a third, fourth, and fifth grader using that model at this point.
So you would prefer the 3, 4, and 5, you think it's gonna lead toward not being on a 100-point scale or A, B, C, D? You feel like there might be a hybrid, or do you feel like you just don't know yet?
I think it makes sense not to divide the district into primary, intermediate, middle, high, and have 4 different grading models. I know we're not talking about different secondary, but it would make sense to have, this is how we assess and provide feedback at the elementary level. They do have a transition to a different building. Let's not change the grading scale on them too, or the model on them too. So you have an elementary model, and then if we're going in a different direction, you have a secondary model. That would be my early proposal, but that's without doing the research on it, right? Like that's without talking to like an Exeter, for example, or some of the other surrounding communities that have that 3, 5 separate building. So I think it's worthwhile to make those phone calls.
I would have to agree. At K-5, we should be on the same scale, whatever that happens. But I do think, just one thing is, the younger you get, the more philosophical discourse you're going to get, which means the work is going to go much slower. If you're truly having a discussion. Because it gets harder the younger you go, for parents, for, I mean, us, my kindergarten used to tell me I got an F or a B or an A, they don't look at you funny. They're like, I know all those letters. But when you start getting around that first and second grade, but you got to think about what's the impact that's going to have on the parent who's getting it home, because there is a developmental range for language. I'll use that example, where up until 8 years old, you can be considered into your normal development and still not have your ending sounds verbally. Yet another kid could start really early. It is a genetic, it's not, it's just a natural development. Grading that and telling a kid because they're slower in development that they're an F is going to be a massive philosophical and functional discussion to have. Not saying it can't happen, just saying that is going to be one long drawn out process. And it's going to, we're gonna have to get through that first before you even get into, let's talk about the next phase. And I just think trying to do them both together, I think you're gonna slow down the whole process because of that other end of the piece.
So it sounds to me like it's 5:54, and we've been here for a while. So it sounds to me like what we ought to do is bring this to the board on May 8th and have a full discussion. And all the principals will be there. They'll be able to participate. Yes?
I think we should make it very well known in the community to the parents what we're
Yes,
talking about.
yes.
So that they can be there also.
Can we do a you video instead of a me video? I don't want to be on the video this time. I'll have you do the video. No, I'm just kidding. All right, sounds good. This is great. It's lively discussion. It's passionate, it's important, but it's important for the principals to understand it. That, and Heidi too, we can talk more. I'm sorry we didn't get to you, but we hire people, we trust them, we want your opinions. This is not a game of, I'm not running an organization with yes people. I want people to be a part of the real conversation. And I still love Jeannie, we're still friends, it's cool, you know, it annoys me. But you can disagree and still be collegial, right? And we may disagree on this, and that's all right. It'll come down to the books, and that's okay. But it is what it is. And I need people to know that as we go through this and we work on our educational practices, that disagreeing and having healthy debate is good. And I think it's good for our kids in the
I was gonna
community.
say it's better for our students if we have.
They need to see us modeling that we can disagree and still like each other. And that is really important because a lot of people have lost that.
People realize that.
Yes, we can disagree and still like each other. All right, agree. Oh, you're the chair. Yeah, Ka-ching.
Okay.